Here's a little secret. Mixing drums doesn't have to be complicated.
Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. Today, let's talk about mixing drums. If mixing drums intimidates you, if you've never done it before, or you just want to get better at it, today's video is for you. I'm going to share with you in good YouTuber fashion 5 steps to a better drum mix. Let's be real, there's no way I can teach you everything there is to know about mixing drums in a short YouTube video. However, my goal for this video, for me and you, is for me to show you a simple formula, a simple way to approach mixing drums that'll help you avoid a lot of the common mistakes. What a lot of people do, tell me if this sounds familiar to you. They sit down to mix drums, and the first thing they do is they turn everything down and they turn up the kick drum. And then they spend the next 30 minutes EQing and compressing and putting saturation plugins and whatever else you do to a kick drum until they get that kick drum sound, because that's what they saw in the YouTube video that said, here's how you mix a kick drum. Then they pull the kick drum down and they push up the snare fader, and they do the same process. EQ, compression, saturation, blah, 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 distortion, I don't know. And then they get it sounding what they think is amazing because that's what the YouTube video said. Then they pull that one down. Then they do the same thing for the toms and the hi-hat and the overheads and the room mics and any other mics that might be present. And then they say, aha, 13 hours later, I have finished mixing my drums. Let me listen to all of them together. Push all the faders up, and it's a disjointed mess. It doesn't make sense. What I'm proposing to you, Grasshopper, is a way to mix drums faster and to also mix them better. And who doesn't want to get better and faster at mixing drums, right? Okay, let's dive in. Probably the most important thing to keep in mind when you mix drums is to remember that the drums, whether you have a couple of tracks or a whole lot of tracks, they are a single instrument. Yes, they're complicated. Yes, it takes a lot of work. Yes, there may be 12, 14, 15 individual drum tracks of a drum performance, but it's still one musician performing one instrument. And that's how you've got to think about it. That will keep you from doing the individual thing and realizing you haven't really mixed the drums. You've just mixed a bunch of individual things that may or may not go well together. So step 1 of this process is to bus all your drums to a drum bus. What is a drum bus? It's simply just a fader that you can run all your drum tracks through. And in doing so, you can use the fader to control the overall volume of the drums, which is nice. But the bigger thing here is you can add plugins to the fader that will apply to all of your drums, to your entire drum mix, and not to just individual pieces of the drum kit. This kind of taps into that backwards mixing thing I talk about a lot. This allows you to process the overall drum mix sound before you go to the individual pieces of the kit. And it also helps you think about the drums as a single unit as opposed to 12 separate tracks. Step number 2 of this process, you're going to want to skip over this, but please don't, because it'll ruin the whole thing. Spend plenty of time on the balance. Once you have all your drum tracks routed to your drum bus, spend a lot of time getting the balance right. Bring up the faders and play around with the volumes and the levels until it sounds as good as you can make it sound by just touching the volumes and the panners. Your temptation is going to be to start reaching for EQ plugins and compressor plugins and try out that new reverb or whatever, but you need to hold off on doing that for just a minute because none of that matters if the drums are out of balance with themselves. So make sure you've got a good kick level, a good snare level, that the overheads are at a good level where you can hear everything well, but the cymbals aren't overpowering. Get the right amount of room mic in there, and any other mics that you have on the kit, get those in their proper places and feeling really good to you before you move on to step 3. Step number 3, once you've got a killer balance, you may have noticed there are some ringing frequencies or certain sort of notes that are jumping out of the mix. In the example that we're using today, the snare drum is ringing quite a lot. To fix that, use a stock EQ, just the basic EQ that comes with your software, to go in, hunt down that frequency, and then take it out. Obviously, first you have to identify where the sound is coming from. It could be picked up by all the microphones on the drum kit. If that's the case, you'll want to do this step on your drum bus. But if it's really only happening on a single channel, on a single microphone, which is the case here on our snare drum, identify that. A great way to test this is to mute the channel and see if the ringing goes away. If it does, you know this is the one. Then solo it for just a second, go in with your stock EQ, find the offending frequency, and pull it out. It's really easy to go overboard with this. I'm not against some ringing. That's part of what drums do, and that's part of the charm of a drum kit. But if it's a little too loud, it's great to go in and just take that frequency out. Occasionally, when you pull that frequency down, another frequency will present itself, and you can easily go down this rabbit hole of, okay, I'm going to pull down that one. Oh, now I'm going to pull down this one. Oh, now I'm going to pull down this one. And you end up completely destroying the snare drum track and it doesn't sound good anymore. I encourage you, especially if you're starting out, just pull down the one main frequency and then leave it alone. I promise you it'll be okay. Step number 4. This is the one that comes closest to being formulaic. Mixing is an art. There's a lot of science involved, but it is an art, and I can't give you a set formula of use these exact settings every time and you'll be golden. And you know that's true. However, I have found that there are some commonalities across all the mixes that I've done over the years and things that I tend to do over and over again. 2 of those commonalities are using EQ and compression on my drum bus. Now, it's really simple. Just pick one. In this example, we're going to EQ first. One of the things I almost always do with EQ is I find that boxy frequency range around 400 hertz and do a cut there. This gets rid of kind of the annoying frequencies in the middle and allow the lows and the highs to stand out a lot more. If you've never done this before, it can be a game changer on your drum mix. After that, I might boost a little low end or a little top end around 7K just to get a little extra brightness out of the drum mix. Up next, compression. A little bit of compression can go a long way when you're doing it on your entire drum mix. There have been times where I've not even compressed the snare drum or the kick drum tracks because there's been just enough compression on the drum bus itself to accomplish the sound that I want. The key here is to aim for just a few dB of gain reduction or compression happening when the kick and the snare hit. That's really it. If it's moving like this, boom, ka, boom, ka, boom, ka, boom, ka, boom, ka, boom, ka, then you're probably right in the sweet spot. It's not staying heavily compressed, but it's going to give that tightness and that punch to your drums that wouldn't be there otherwise. And that's essentially it. In 4 simple steps, we've gotten a pretty stinking good drum sound. We've gone from our drum sounding like this to sounding like this. And we've only used 3 plugins. Now, the 5th optional step is, of course, you may want to use plugins on the individual tracks. There may need to be a little more EQ work on some of the individual tracks. You may want to do some extra compression on some of the individual tracks. But know this, none of it's required. It's only required if you listen and you say, there's something here that's missing that I need. There's a problem I need to address. Otherwise, if you finish your mix and you only have 3 plugins on your drums, but it sounds amazing, guess what? Job's done. You're good. And you didn't waste hours of time putting 30 plugins on a single track of your drum mix because you just didn't need to. In this example, the only major problem that I could hear was there was some extra resonance in the kick drum, this kind of whoa that happened every time the kick drum hit. I went through and listened a little bit and discovered that it was in the room mic and the fat mic. They were a little too beefy in the low end. So I just put a simple EQ with a high pass filter, which cleaned up the low end tremendously. And I'm sure I might do a few more things on this drum mix in the future once I add in all the instruments, but it's sounding really good to me. And I've got a total of 5 plugins on there. Okay, so that's it. Here's the thing. Don't just watch this video and nod your head and then move along to the next one. Go try this. Pull up a session in your studio and try it. If you've never done it this way and you're skeptical, even better. Go try it and see if it works. Prove me right or prove me wrong. Either way, you'll be better because of it. And if you need some tracks to practice on, I've done a series of videos. I've done 3 seasons now called Mix Together. And if you go to homestudiocorner.com/MT, you can sign up to my email list and I will send you the download links to 3 separate songs, each of which contains drums, and you can practice this exact technique on any of those tracks. Plus, if you want to follow along with me and mix the entire song, those videos are available for free on YouTube as well. It's all free. It's all good. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. See you later.